Hey guys, it's Dark Humility with a last fun video I'm going to make before the launch of Season 11 Prosperity for Project Diablo 2, literally tomorrow, May 16th, 10 a.m. PT. Today, we're going to do a lightning round for my late game solo mapping tier list, where for each build, I will give as fast as possible the mercenary type and any major gear items for major gear slots that define the mercenary build for that late game build, in addition to whether or not the late game build and as a mapping build is very casual friendly or dad gamer friendly. I will give a yes or a no for that. Yes, it is friendly. No, it is not. All right, when I say lightning round, I'm going to try to go as fast as possible. So let's see how it goes. It could be a disaster, but there's about 115 builds on this list, so maybe I'll forget some things, maybe I'll goof it up, but in general, we'll see how we do. I don't have any notes here with me. I don't have anything, no script. I'm just going to go down this list, and you guys are going to learn another very key piece of information for how to play these builds effectively, or whether or not you want to play them at all in the endgame. So let's do it. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin. Nova, Act 2, Mercenary Defiance. You're going to want to use a Stormspire with Innocence and Ferocity as a most optimal approach for either an Iron Golem, or if you're wearing, if you have an Iron Golem Infinity, or if you're wearing Infinity Staff. But you'll be wearing an Infinity though if you're wearing a Mangsong's Lesson with no Golem. Charge Bolt, you're going to be wearing an Infinity, possibly with just high defense items. On the Mercenary, Act 2 Defiance as well. Oh yeah, sorry, no, dang, no, not friendly to casuals, no. Charge Bolt, also not friendly to casuals, high APM intensive. Chain Lightning, high APM intensive. Not super friendly to casuals, but at least you could play a little bit farther back, so maybe it's a little more friendly to them. It's kind of in the middle. Also, Act 2 Defiance Mercenary, Infinity. Okay, with defensive gear. Frost Nova Sorceress. Infinity is the most ideal mercenary weapon. Ideally, once again, with Ferocity helmet and Innocence armor, if possible. That would be the most. And of course, it is not very casual friendly. It is expensive. Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb is a bit more casual friendly, but it's still not very casual friendly. Pretty high APM just in general, moving around a lot. It's kind of intense, but not as intense as Nova, not nearly as intense as Nova. And once again, Infinity with defensive items on the Mercenary. Ice Barrage, Infinity with defensive items on the Mercenary. In addition to being kind of like Orb, which is where it is probably even less friendly than Orb, so I'm going to say no. Blizzard. Blizzard's a lot more casual friendly, as you can kind of run up to stuff, and you don't necessarily have to teleport to reposition, but for maximum monsters per minute, it is a little high APM though, and you kind of have to time your blizzards, so no, it is not casual friendly. And once again, Infinity Act 2 Defiance Mercenary with defensive items on the Mercenary, possibly Ferocity as well to get them distracted and to cluster them up for the blizzard. Ferocity, Innocence, armor. Glacial Spike. Glacial Spike is kind of similar to Blizzard. Once again, ideal setup would be Infinity, Innocence armor, Ferocity helm on the Mercenary, on an Act 2 Defiance Mercenary. And then, of course, it is not super casual friendly. Multiple Shot Widowmaker is a lot more casual friendly, as you could kind of play it a lot slower. I'm going to actually say yes for this. Can just kind of play back and kill things despite it being kind of slow. However, the Mercenary is, once again, Infinity, Infinity, Act 2 Defiance, possibly Act 2 Blessed Aim, though, because you might need the attack rating. But usually you won't with Cold Enchant. But yeah, usually it'll be Defiance. It could be Act 2 Blessed Aim, though. Very possible, once again, with Infinity, possibly Innocence, Ferocity, or just high defense gear such as Shaft Staff and Crown of Ages and Vampire Gaze and things like that. Cold Enchant Strafe. Cold Enchant Strafe is just like multiple shot. I would actually say there's no difference in anything I would say there. Cold Enchant Werebear Sorceress. Cold Enchant Werebear Sorceress, I actually prefer, for the sake of frames, you'd probably want to, you could use Infinity, Blessed Aim, especially if you're kind of lacking AR once again. But and of course, it kind of depends though on what kind of character you're playing and whatnot. You could have, because you're a frontliner, you could have an Act 1 Mercenary with Vigor Aura. So you could have the Vigor Aura to make you run really fast. And then you could run like Faith, which can help out with some frames, but since you're a werebear, it doesn't really help all that much. It's all attack speed from your weapon. So Infinity on the Mercenary and maybe Hustle is actually a better choice so that you run faster with that. So that's very key to that setup. But otherwise, with the Infinity Merc, you would be running a very similar approach to the multi-shot and strafe that I described before. And there you have it. Combustion. Combustion is Infinity Mercenary for sure. Act 2 Defiance. However, it is very possible that you're going to want to go Flickering Flame on the helmet as a key approach, and the rest being defensive gear, as Flickering Flame has Resist Fire Aura, which is going to help out your fire damage. No, this is not very casual friendly, as opposed to all the Cold Enchant builds, which are a lot more one-button builds and a lot simpler. Combustion actually requires a lot of timing for optimal gameplay. Meteor. Meteor is actually casual friendly, so is Hydra. So I'm actually going to say yes on these because you can just cast Blaze and refresh it every so often, and then otherwise it's a one-button build as you spam them. Definitely Infinity on both of these, on Hydra and Meteor. However, on the Hydra one, it'd be Infinity Act 2, possibly Flickering Flame, but you can also go Ferocity and Innocence to help crowd the monsters and to keep them off of you as you cast the Hydras. I think that might be a little bit better. Meteor is actually kind of interesting. It doesn't necessarily have to be Act 2 Defiance because there's a physical component to the damage. You can actually go Act 4 Mercenary with Infinity Staff, and then you can also go well, Infinity Staff, Flickering Flame, but he also casts Amp, so you're going to go Act 4 Dark Mercenary. That is a real possibility there, and then you get both damage types represented. However, if you're going to cast Blaze and move it around, the Act 4 Merc might have problems surviving. Just make sure to give it as much defensive gear as possible. Inferno Sorc is definitely Flickering Flame and Infinity on an Act 2 Defiance Mercenary. This is pretty casual friendly as it's pretty simple to play. There is some teleporting involved though. I'm going to say yes though. It's pretty good, even in the late game. Vengeance Kingslayer. Melee Sorcs in general require a little bit more knowledge about how to build a character and how to play it effectively so you don't die. So I'm going to say it's not very casual friendly. Also, it's a little complicated, definitely from the build standpoint. We did just test this season after all. And then, of course, the Act 2 Defiance or Blessed Aim. Blessed Aim might be even more possible here because Cold Enchant isn't as pronounced, but it's still pretty good. So I would say probably Act 2 Defiance, Infinity, and definitely Ferocity and Innocence. Ferocity Helmet and Innocence Armor definitely helping a lot there if you can get them. On this character, the passive Sorc, yeah, you're definitely going to want an Infinity Mercenary. Or it's very possible you can also go Infinity Iron Golem and Stormspire Merc, but the Iron Golem's probably going to die because you don't do enough damage. So definitely Infinity Defiance on the Mercenary. Or sorry, yeah, on the Mercenary with Ferocity and Innocence if possible for that confused proc. Very nice stuff. All right, on to the Druid builds. Twister and Tornado are pretty noob friendly, pretty one-button builds. Just got to cast Gust and then Twister Tornado. I'm going to say they're pretty casual friendly. Not the most casual friendly in the world, but they're pretty good. You have two main options on these, so you can go an Act 1 Mercenary with Wrath in the late game, obviously amp bows all the way up to that, with Physical Arrow, and that's going to cast Strafe and cast as much amp as possible in front of you, so that the Twisters and Tornadoes do maximum damage. Of course, the rest of the Mercenary will focus on reaching 100% Pierce and getting defensive gear. However, the other option is an Act 5 Mercenary, which I really enjoy, wearing an Innocence armor, a Cyclopean Roar helm, and possibly a Vile Husk or a Gavel of Pain for Amp proc and Battle Cry proc on a Battle Orders Whirlwind Act 5 Mercenary. Once again, the Innocence Blade Shield proccing them all. Really amazing approach as well. But for that, you're definitely going to be tele-stomping more, whereas like the Act 1 Vigor Mercenary can allow you to play a bit farther back. So it's preference-based. Arctic Blast Hurricane. Yeah, this is pretty noob-friendly. There is something else you're going to have to refresh with this, just like with Twister Tornado, which is Hurricane. But overall, it's pretty noob-friendly. Not too many buttons. Of course, you might have to revive your zoo with some of these, so it's a little... I don't know, I'd say these are definitely more mid builds. They're definitely like in between casual friendly and not casual friendly, but they're also not super intense. Any of these really. I mean, even like Molten Boulder, Fissure, Volcano, they're not like super intense. You just cast and move on for the most part. So I'd say they're kind of like in the middle between casual and not. So, but anyway, Arctic Blast Hurricane, you're going to want to go Innocence, Ferocity, and Infinity if you could afford it on the Mercenary in the endgame for clustering up the monsters. On an Act 2 Defiance Mercenary. Molten Boulder. Molten Boulder has hybrid fire physical damage, so it kind of depends on what you want to achieve. I actually really like the Act 4 Dark Mercenary with the Infinity Staff, though, and the Flickering Flame Helmet, and the rest being defensive and castrate gear, just like on the Meteor Sork. That's also very possible. And then let's see, so Fissure, so Fissure's definitely Act 2 Defiance Mercenary with Flickering Flame, and the rest being defensive gear. Volcano can be the Act 4 Mercenary approach like that I just discussed on the Molten Boulder. It can also be Act 2 Defiance with Infinity and Flickering Flame as well. Whew. All right, keep going. Bear Shockwave. I actually think this is a very noob-friendly build. You just run up to stuff and kill things with Shockwave. Amazing stuff. Very good for casuals, noobs, or anyone just playing for the first time. Doesn't really matter. Very easy to execute. You just turn into a bear and start running around and shockwaving things, using Hunger if you want some fast run walk. Pretty easy. I definitely think the more dominant approach here is probably Act 1 Mercenary with Vigor, so you can run as fast as you possibly can, and then get an amp bow, so Wrath, and then the rest of the Mercenary being focused on defensive gear for the most part. You could also definitely do the Act 5 Mercenary, Whirlwind Mercenary thing with the Battle Cry and the amp weapon, the Battle Cry from Cyclopean Roar. Rabies. Rabies are going to use the Pus Spitter on an Act 1 Mercenary, physical Mercenary, and it's going to cast lower resist as much as possible. Or, I actually kind of think these days, the Act 5 Mercenary with Rapture weapon and Innocence armor can be very good as well. The Innocence armor also being very good on the Pus Spitter Act 1 Mercenary, but you got to be careful because she's squishy, so you're going to have to get a lot of damage reduction elsewhere if you're going to play it like that. I do think Rabies is kind of casual friendly. It's pretty one button, and it's very tanky, so that's pretty good. Fire Claws. Fire Claws, you're going to go Infinity Act 2 Defiance Mercenary. It's possible you need attack rating though, so Blessed Aim is always on the table there. And then of course you're going to use Infinity Weapon, and you're going to use Flickering Flame Helmet most likely for that extra flat % fire damage boost. And I think it's pretty casual friendly. It's pretty simple to execute. Same thing with any wolf build, honestly. Pretty simple to execute. Even bear builds. Bear builds are a little tougher to execute, but I don't know. They're kind of mid, but they're also pretty casual friendly. I mean, you got like Feral Rage going on, but it's not too crazy. Anyway, so Wolf with Fury. Fury is going pretty hard. I guess we do for the Mercenary. I think it makes most sense on Fury to go with a Act 2 Mercenary with Blessed Aim, Pride, and Templar's Might. So you can get that aura bot that follows you as you crush things. So that's pretty useful. The Twister proc one that was back to that amp weapon, Cyclopean Roar, Innocence, Act 5 Whirlwind Mercenary, as that's going to definitely, the negative physical res buffs are going to do the most on that. But these are pretty good for casuals, though. Maul and Multiple Shot Maul, very similar. Maul is the exact same as Fury. Bear, Multiple Shot Maul is also kind of the same thing as Fury. But because it's maybe a little bit more dependent on negative phys res, you could also consider dropping auras in favor of that Act 5 negative phys res proc mercenary as well in the end game. Alright, summons. Summons, you definitely have the choice between, in my opinion, the Wrath Amplify Bow Act 1 Mercenary with Vigor Aura so that your summons are more responsive and you get that all-pervasive amplify damage, along with Might Aura from the Templar's Might. You can also, of course, go a Might Concentration Act 5 Mercenary with the Innocence Cyclopean Roar amp weapon combo as well, particularly if you're tele-stomping with these builds. Poison Creeper. Poison Creeper, I definitely feel like the Act 5 Rapture Mercenary would definitely be ideal. Once again, with Innocence and possibly with Ferocity as well to keep the monsters busy as you teleport around, or you run around with the wolf and cast the creepers on top of the monster packs. Very cool stuff. Alright, let's continue. We got Chain Lightning Sentry. Chain Lightning Sentry, you're going to go with... oh, by the way, a Poison Creeper can be pretty casual friendly. It's a little tougher, though, if you're teleporting around. Almost forgot that. Chain Lightning Sentry is casual friendly, despite being slow. It is pretty easy to execute. Traps are pretty easy to execute in general, particularly the Chain Lightning Sentry and the Wake of Fire. The other one's a little tougher just because they have less range, so I'd actually say they're not casual friendly. All the way down to Ice Blast. That's kind of my opinion. Fire Blast and Shockweb are not as casual friendly. The other ones are, and for the most part. And of course, on all these builds, you're going to be going an Act 2 Defiance Infinity Mercenary. On the fire versions of the build, you're going to have Flickering Flame on the Mercenary as well. The other ones, you might want to go Ferocity Innocence, and then if it's Flickering Flame, you just go Defense on the rest of the Act 2 Defiance Mercenary. You go down to Death Sentry, though. The Mercenary is actually going to be wearing Innocence and Viper Fork, because that's very key to the build. You just jump into the monsters with Dragonflight, and then cast the Desecrate, which allows you to cast Death Sentry and blow up the monsters. So on that, you're definitely going to do that. Ferocity is also really good for keeping the monsters busy on this. So Ferocity, Innocence, Viper Fork is pretty nice on this particular approach. And I guess I'd go Act 2 Defiance because that makes the most sense, of course. And then, of course, Blade Fury. Blade Fury, I definitely feel like I definitely think an Innocence, Cyclopean Roar, Amp Weapon, Might Mercenary, so the Concentration Mercenary, is going to work really well here, as long as you're jumping into the monster packs with Dragonflight and shredding them with Fury. Super fun stuff. Then also, you can run... Oh yeah, sorry. It is pretty casual friendly, I would say. It's pretty one button, 1-2 button. In general, martial arts are pretty casual friendly, except I would say for Phoenix Strike and to some degree, maybe Fists of Fire if you're playing them ultra optimally, but you don't have to play them super optimally. So it kind of depends on how much you want to optimize them. If you want to optimize them at only the second charge and move on to the next pack, it can take an approach that is a lot less casual, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. But anyway, Blade Sentinel will be the exact same mercenary as Blade Fury. All of these, all the way down for the most part, are going to be Infinity Act 2 Defiance, perhaps with, sorry, not Tiger Strike, all the way down to Blades of Ice. And then, of course, Ferocity and Innocence on the Mercenary. They're also like semi-casual, as I just explained. That being said, on the Fist of Fire one, you're going to run Flickering Flame on the helmet, Mercenary helmet, which is really good. And then on Cobra Strike, you're going to run Rapture Mercenary for that lower resist proc. Rapture, Innocence, and Ferocity if possible, which is really cool. And then the other thing is on Claws of Thunder or Phoenix Strike, you could actually run an Infinity Iron Golem and consider running Stormspire, Innocence, Ferocity, Mercenary instead. So that's another interesting aspect of all that. But yeah. And then on Tiger Strike, you should probably... it does depend on a couple things, but for the most part, I think you're running the Act 5 proc Cyclopean Roar, Battle Cry, Amp Procs, and Innocence Mercenary. And then on Dragon Tail and Talon, since it's like hybrid fire damage and physical damage, you could definitely consider running an Act 4 Mercenary with Act 4 Dark Mercenary with Amp and dang. Well, yeah, the Amp and the Conviction from the Infinity Staff, and then also running Flickering Flame on it as well in defensive gear. Mind Blast, Psychic Hammer. This one, I definitely think Act 5 Mercenary is definitely the winner with the Cyclopean Roar, Innocence, and Amp weapon combo to get maximum negative Phys Res debuff. And then, of course, being on a Whirlwind Mercenary because you don't need the Might Aura. And it is pretty casual, yeah. It's a super simple build actually to play. So is Dragon Tail Talon, by the way, and Tiger Strike. I'd say these are all pretty simple. They're at least semi-casual. Mind Blast is totally casual, though. That one's easy. These are really simple, too. One-button builds, highly casual builds, as long as you can get the setup for them. The Blade Dances. In general, most important thing for these is to get those aura buffs off the Mercenary. So I do tend to recommend the Concentration Aura, Might Aura, Blessed Aim Mercenary. In other words, the Act 2 Blessed Aim for the Deadly Strike, and the Templar's Might for the Might Aura, and Pride for the damage weapon. And the rest, of course, is defensive on those builds. Okay, let's keep going. Double Swing and Frenzy. So most barb builds in general are just physical damage builds. So for the most part, you're going to want damage auras until you get to Warcry, where Warcry would be something like an Innocence Reaper's Mercenary for like that instant amp. So Innocence, Reapers, and Ferocity for a bit more survivability. Or, of course, once again, that Act 5 Mercenary, where you go Cyclopean Roar, Innocence, and Amp weapon, Amp on Striking weapon, of course, on a Whirlwind Mercenary, because you don't need Might. And that one, of course, Warcry, I'd say, is pretty easy to execute, but you do have to teleport, and you kind of have to time your teleports to not run out of teleports in the end game. So I would say not super casual friendly, but it's also not insanely complicated or hard because it's pretty tanky. Kind of depends. The rest of the physical builds that are not the elemental builds, so I'll talk about the fire builds, or if you want to run Stormspire or whatever you want to run on the Barbarian, there's other possible elemental builds. But on any of the other physical builds, you're looking at, for the most part, some kind of damage aura combination. So on the Wolf Barb, for instance, you would run Pride, Templars, on Act 2 Blessed Aim, or Act 2 Defiance Mercenary if you want the more defensive approach. The same thing would go for Whirlwind as well at every stage. Double Swing and Frenzy actually kind of depends. You can run an Act 5 Mercenary with Might, Whirlwind, so like you could run Templars on a Whirlwind Mercenary with Beast as well for Fanaticism, so that you can hit those really important breakpoints. And then yeah, basically. So like Beast, Templars, and the rest being defensive gear, you could totally run that, or Beast, Templars, and Cyclopean Roar, and you'll still get a decent amount of that. And since on Double Swing Frenzy you tend to be able to proc amp a bit better, you can definitely run that. So that tends to be a pretty good approach. I do think most of these builds are pretty simple to play. Warcry is probably one of the more complicated ones, so I actually like the Barb for the simplicity, and I actually rate them A+ in the casual territory for the most part. Fire Whirlwind though is gonna be so. Oh, actually, let's go to Double Throw. So Double Throw Fanaticism Might is actually really good. You could even use an Act 1 Mercenary for Vigor if you want to run really fast on it. I like the Act 5 one because you can also get the Battle Cry on striking from Cyclopean Roar. And you can also get the double auras, the Fanaticism from Beast and the Might from Templars on a Whirlwind Mercenary. And then you get like 2 sources of potentially a Battle Cry, which is really good. And of course, I do consider this to be a pretty solid build just in general. But yeah, you could also run Faith Mercenary as well, Faith Might Mercenary, with the rest being defensive gear on an Act 1 Vigor Aura Mercenary. But that approach is a little sketchier, but it's really good for if you want to run really fast, particularly in like weaker maps. Okay, let's talk a little, and then of course Leap Attack is the concentration might approach on the Mercenary for the most part. Because you would use Cyclopean Roar on yourself, because you can proc it really easily. You can even run Innocence on yourself to proc it as well, in addition to just using a super high powerful weapon. Now on Fire Leap Attack and Fire Whirlwind, it's a little different. For the Mercenary, you're going to want to use an Act 2 Defiance or an Act 2 Blessed Aim Mercenary, depending on your attack rating situation. Fire, you definitely use Flickering Flame for the helmet. You'd use Infinity for the weapon. And that's how you would get those done. And once again, all very casual friendly, very simple builds in the endgame. Okay. Amazon, Lightning Fury. So Lightning Fury is pretty straightforward. Act 2 Defiance Mercenary with Infinity. And the rest being defensive gear is what I would suggest. Lightning Strike, very similar. In that regard, you could use Ferocity and Innocence because you're going right up next to the monsters if you want that confused proc, but it's pretty similar. Power Strike and Charge Strike are also the exact same approaches. And all of these builds, I would say, are very simple. They're all one-button builds. In general, Amazon builds are incredibly simple, 1 or 2 button builds. I think kind of like with Summon Druid, which I think is like incredibly casual friendly. I definitely think that like all of the Amazon builds practically are super casual friendly, so I really like that. Pretty easy to get into as long as you have the power and whatnot, and just stand back. So we'll just get that out of the way real quick. And then Plague Javelin. Plague Javelin, you could definitely run a couple of different approaches. I think the Rapture Act 5 Mercenary with Whirlwind and Innocence armor and possibly Ferocity, though, is going to be probably your top approach. That being said, Vigor can allow you to run even faster to weave in between monsters as you cast it. So I could definitely see the appeal also of the highly defensive, possibly Innocence, Pus Spitter Mercenary, or an even more defensive version that uses like Shaft and just Pus Spitter with a Vigor Aura, so Act 1 Vigor Aura Mercenary. Jab Fend, you need your breakpoints on this, so it's pretty important that I would say on these builds, pretty non-negotiable to go Act 5 Mercenary, probably with, I would say Native Might, and then Innocence, Cyclopean Roar, and Amp Weapon. And then you get as many auras as you possibly can. So the Might Concentration Barb. And as long as you jump in with Zere's Resolve with that Joust cooldown, it's going to be really sick. And you're going to get all that negative Fizz Res debuff as well, so it's really good. Bow and crossbow trees. So once again, actually, wait. I think I I botched this. I was trying to go too fast. Yeah. So you need fanaticism on the mercenary. My bad. So you're probably gonna go fanat. You could go like fanaticism, innocence, cyclopean roar. So you could go like beast on the mercenary if you want. I don't think an Act 4 mercenary would survive, so don't worry about that. But like an Act 5 mercenary, like an Act 4 dark mercenary for amp. But yeah, you definitely need the beast. The beast weapon would be pretty sick on this, and yeah. And then of course the might aura. So you get might aura from either native barbarian concentration, or you get it from Templars, and then you go whirlwind with BC, or you get the battle cry from Cyclopean Roar, and then more so from Innocence. And then you have like the native might. The non-native might, of course, would use the Templar's might. So it just kind of depends. I'd say either approach is pretty good on those builds. All right, let's go back. Oh man, I knew I'd scuff something. All right, multiple shot strafe. All right, multiple shot strafe. It's definitely fanaticism, might, vigor, or Act 1 mercenary. You're gonna want to run as fast as possible, and you're gonna want Act 1 to give you that beast and the might from either Templars. Well, actually, no. It'd be sorry. Act 1 would be faith and Templars. Damn, I'm getting so mixed up now. Dang, come on, we gotta focus. It'd be fanaticism from faith, and then be Templar's might, and then the rest of the gear would be for defensive on the Act 1 mercenary. I really like that for running really fast, but let's say you're in a tough map, it might make more sense to actually go beast Templars, or beast on a might concentration barb that then also has like innocence and cyclopean roar for casting battle cry, or it's just native on the whirlwind one that also uses cyclopean roar. So you do tend to run pretty fast even without vigor, so there's definitely a good argument for using that, especially against like harder areas like cows potentially. So that's a really good thing to consider. Freezing arrow, cold arrow, fire arrow, exploding arrow. For the most part, if you want to run fast while also having your negative res, you'll go Act 2 Defiance or Blessed Aim, I guess, if you're struggling in the AR department. But you'll go Defiance with Infinity, and for the fire ones, you'll use Flickering Flame on the helmet. If not, you'll just use defensive items on the mercenary. Possibly you could do Innocence, Ferocity just for fun as well, and it won't really matter that much. But you could definitely do those on all those approaches. Magic Arrow is actually quite interesting. Magic Arrow has, I definitely think it's important on Magic Arrow for the Mercenary to be in front of you, though, for that Sanctuary aura. And so the Sanctuary aura does not have high radius, so you're going to want that in front of you on the front line. So I think for the most part, you're looking for probably a Asylum Act 5 mercenary, maybe even with Heavenly Garb for even a higher level Sanctuary aura on top of that. And then the rest being defensive gear. Definitely with that Whirlwind on the Act 5 mercenary, it makes a lot of sense. You don't need might though, so you could just use the Whirlwind on that. I guess the other choice would be Act 2 Defiance with Asylum Spear. And then you could also go the rest, possibly you could go like Innocence, Ferocity for keeping the monsters clustered up for the more limited AoE as well. But either way, I'd say those are pretty good approaches. The Act 5 could also use Innocence, Ferocity as well, if you don't care for the extra levels from Heavenly Garb. But those would definitely be the top approaches, I would say, on that. Passive and magic tree. So for the most part, I would say on the Valkyrie strafe one, you're definitely going to want Vigor Aura and Fanaticism. So back to the Act 1 Vigor Aura Mercenary with Faith and Templars for might, and the rest being defensive gear. And then pretty similar, I would say, on the pure decoy summon, but on the decoy summon, they don't really move around, so you don't really need Vigor Aura as much. I actually think the Act 5 Mercenary, back to that Amp Weapon, Cyclopean Roar, Innocence approach, will actually be really good as long as it's a Whirlwind Mercenary whirling in front of you and hitting all those negative res points. So it should be really sick. Let's see. Poison Nova. Poison Nova Desecrate. These are definitely builds where ideally you're going to be using a Act 5 Mercenary using a Rapture weapon, Innocence, and Ferocity. The same will be for Poison Strike as well, especially Poison Strike for that Confuse. If you can get that on the Mercenary, will be really sick. Teeth. Teeth I actually really like. There's definitely a couple of good approaches here. I definitely think the Act 5 Whirlwind Mercenary with Asylum and Heavenly Garb is going to do really well because it jumps out in front of you. But because you tend to jump out right in front of the monsters on this one sometimes just to smash them with Teeth, as long as you're using Blood Warp right in front of the monsters, you can justify using an Act 4 Light Mercenary as well. And because of Blood Warp, the healage from the Holy Nova on the Act 4 Light Merc is really good. So I actually think that's a very unique use of that mercenary, which is really cool. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Poison Nova is not for casuals. We have to go back to... I forgot I did like a catch-all for the Amazon. Desecrate is more for casuals. You can stand a bit further back. Poison Strike is definitely not for casuals. That's a tough build and can be a tough play style as well. Kind of like Nova. Teeth is definitely friendly to casuals, so is Bone Spear. Pretty far back, pretty easy to play. No kind of problems. By the way, Bone Spear, same recommended mercenary as Teeth potentially, or at least the 2 recommended mercenaries. I really like the idea because of Blood Warp eating your life on the Necromancer using the Act 4 Light Mercenary. That has that base Sanctuary aura, so that's really cool. Definitely a good idea. Bone Wall, I actually recommend no mercenary. Well, I'm half kidding and half not, actually. To be fair, like, you don't really need one, and it might get in the way. But let's say you did want a mercenary. I'd want a mercenary that probably buffed you up defensively as much as possible. Something like an Act 3 mercenary with a lightning static field would be good because the static field would lower all their HP. Or something that gave you like Cleansing or Prayer, Act 3 Merc, and those tend to hold pretty close to you because they cast, so that would probably be best actually. So another very creative use of an endgame mercenary, possibly Act 3 or none. Don't need that. Watch the video and you'll see what I mean. I'd say Bonewall actually is kind of casual, but there is like a curse involved in it, and it's a little more... Actually, nah, scratch that. It's a little tough to play. I'm gonna say not casual friendly. Actually, Corpse Explosion, not casual friendly. Way too button spammy. Way too many buttons. There's like 3 buttons you have to do in succession, and sometimes 4. That one could be kind of nasty. That being said, Corpse Explosion. Typically, you're gonna just want that Infinity Act 2 Mercenary. With Flickering Flame as well for that fire damage boost. You could, of course, justify so that you don't have to cast any curses yourself, which tends to be the most prominent approach. You can use the Act 4 Mercenary with Infinity Staff and Amp, so the Dark Mercenary. I really like that approach on Corpse Explosion, actually, as well. It kind of depends how defensive you want to be, but the thing about the Act 4 Mercenary is you can get away with it pretty easily on this build because you have max revives, so it's pretty easy. I really like it. Physical Skelly Summon. Definitely gotta probably... Well, see, you could have like a Concentration or an Iron Golem, and in the case of doing that, you can justify going Cyclopean Roar, Templar's Might, and Beast on an Act 5 Whirlwind Barb. So that could be a really good approach. And I think that's how you get like the maximum buffs and debuffs that you possibly can with a Concentration Iron Golem. That's what I like to do. Summoners tend to be really friendly. for novices. Green Goblin positioning is really important, so I don't know how casual friendly it is, but it's not insanely button intensive, so I'd say it's like okay for casuals. It's a bit more intensive though. Anyway, for the Mercenary, though, this is pretty unique. The Mercenary is the build. It uses Innocence and Demon Machine for proccing multi-shot. And then the rest of the Mercenary is literally just trying to max out its damage. And so that means getting max Pierce and just max damage. And yeah, fun stuff. Summoner Pure Revive. And so on this one, you're going to want to use things that boost the power of your revives. So the Act 5 Mercenary or a bot that also casts Battle Cry and Amp, or Battle Cry would actually be pretty good. So Fanaticism, Might, Battle Cry combo on the Act 5 Merc we've talked about a few times now. With Whirlwind is going to be really strong. And then of course you can get the amp on yourself. So you're a necromancer, so you just amp the monsters, amp plus decrep even. So you can go pure revive, amp plus decrep, and then maybe even a concentration iron golem, and then you get beast, and then you get templars and cyclopean roar, and you have all kinds of ultra strong revives. It should be a lot of fun. Elemental summoner. Elemental summoner conviction. So act 2 defiance, infinity, probably a flickering flame for fire skillies, so, or especially for council members, so I could definitely see that being very useful. If you have somehow an infinity iron golem though, you could use a Stormspire Mercenary for those lightning LE revives as well, and for lightning mages, so it kind of depends on the approach you want to take. Fire golems. Fire golems definitely a flickering flame mercenary with infinity. Act 2. Could even go Act 2 Blessed Aim. It might help the golems hit. I don't know if they have AR problems. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure. But you go either like Blessed Aim or Defiance. Defiance is pretty simple on that. Another very easy summoner to execute, and it's pretty nice and friendly to casuals. Clay golems. Clay golems are definitely going to want probably, I would say, because of the lack of responsiveness, you're probably gonna want like I don't know. I mean, you could also use the vigor or a shield, so it's kind of tough. I'm gonna say Act 5 once again. Act 5 with beast, Templars for might, and then whirlwind, so it casts battle cry with both itself and with the cyclopean roar. It does it on default, so that's good. Dark Pact. Dark Pact is kind of interesting. I would say Dark Pact probably once again pretty beneficial to have like an asylum on an Act 5 mercenary against something that actually goes out in front of you and gets into the monsters, so it actually gets the sanctuary aura on them on top of heavenly garb for that max aura level, and the rest being defensive gear. You could also go Act 2 though with an Asylum Spear, very possible if you want that Defiance aura, and it won't be too different. You could also use Heavenly Garb on him. They both kind of go out in front. One is tankier in different scenarios though. And then, because it's a Necromancer, once again, I really like the Act 4 Light Mercenary as well, so definitely consider that as well on that Mercenary. Dark Pact though is not casual friendly. It's probably one of the least casual friendly builds in the game. That being said, with certain gear you only have to click like 2 or 3 buttons instead of like 5, but it's still pretty it's still really intense. It's just an intense build. That is not a casual build. Casual build will be pretty rough on that. All right, so we're gonna go passive boner now on my list. That is actually pretty casual friendly. All you have to do is teleport and cast bone armor for the most part. I really like that. And then I think Act 4 Mercenary being as tanky as possible, Act 4 Light and using Holy Nova is really good with the Sanctuary Aura. But once again, that Act 5 or Act 2 more defensive approach, or an approach that goes more into the monsters. But since you're actually supposed to go to the monsters yourself on this build, I don't know. I think I actually prefer maybe the Act 4 Mercenary for that healing. It's really good. You could, of course, also go for an Act 3 Mercenary with Azarath, interestingly enough. And then you don't get as high of a level of Sanctuary Aura, but then you can get one with like Prayer, and you can heal, so that could also be a pretty good option, interestingly enough, on that build, and that's kind of useful because you're going to need as much health as possible jumping into the monsters. So you also have Fist of the Heavens. So Fist of the Heavens, very casual friendly. It's a little tougher to execute though. You're definitely going to go something like an Act 5 Asylum Mercenary on this one, or an Act 2 Defiance Mercenary with Asylum as well. Act 5 Whirlwind Mercenary with Asylum. Holy Bull, also casual friendly, same options though. Blessed Hammer, same options. I really like Act 2 in this one though, because it's right on top of you as you joust into monsters or teleport with Blessed Hammer. So on Blessed Hammer, I think Act 2 Defiance with Asylum Spear tends to just win out, in my opinion, because it also freezes and prevents things from getting on top of you, which is really nice. And once again, using the Heavenly Garbs as the weapon, and then the rest is just defensive approaches. And then Sacrifice Hammer proc, same thing. Just getting that Sanctuary Aura as well as you possibly can on the Mercenary, using all those different Act 2 and Act 5 Asylum approaches. Physical Zeal. Physical Zeal in general, there's a lot of different ways to play it. Using Might on yourself, for instance, is kind of tough, though. I actually think probably the best way to play it, though, just for the most part, is using Fanaticism on yourself, just the classic Pride Templars on the Mercenary with defensive gear on an Act 2 Blessed Aim Mercenary for Deadly Strike. That tends to work really well in Physical Zeal, and then it allows you to use Fanaticism for a Tri-Aura approach, and then getting Amp from Atmas upon attacking.
I can already tell that
there
I'll
are
be your best
other
friend
approaches,
in
though,
this
that work
forsaken
pretty
camp.
much just as well, though, like the Act 5 Mercenary approach using Templars. On a Might Concentration Mercenary, actually, you can use Innocence, Cyclopean Roar, and an Amp weapon to get Amp and Battle Cry procs like instantaneously, which is really cool. And then you can like maybe use the only weakness of that one though, I would say, is that you don't get the concentration aura, so then you probably have to use Fanaticism on yourself, and then you lose an aura, but overall I'd say it's pretty good because maybe the Amp and the Battle Cry is more frequent, so it kind of just depends on the scenario. Zeal is pretty easy to play though. Sacrifice Hammer proc is a little more tedious, but pretty easy to play. Hammerdin's really easy to play, but I would say if you want to chain between Enigma and Joust on this build, which is often the case, it is a little more tedious, so maybe it's not casual friendly. Plus Hammerdin is so much more casual friendly on LOD. In this mod, it's a little more tedious, so I don't know. I don't know where I'm at on that one. Foe Holy Proc Zeal. So you're actually wearing Asylum in principle on yourself. There's definitely like a couple different ways you could build a Mercenary on this one. You could even go like an Act 3 Static Mercenary just to lower their health before they just take massive damage from the procs from Asylum in principle. When you get the maximum synergies for them on your skills. You could do that. It's not unheard of. You can also go Fanaticism, Might Mercenary as well. So you could go, or you could just go, something like a Beast Templars, or a Beast on a Might Concentration Barb can be pretty good with the Battle Cry proc. It'd be pretty decent. And then on yourself, you could even use like a Concentration Aura or Might. So yeah, because I mean you have the Sanctuary Aura on yourself, so it's a little strange, but yeah, there's definitely some interesting things you can do. You can even use Zenith on the Mercenary if you want like more of a defensive approach. It's kind of neat. But yeah, there's a lot of different things you could do, I think. Physical, you could even use like a really powerful Act 3 Mercenary for like damage, even, I would say, on this. and then you could use like Exile on it, and it could be very defensive, and you could just have more sources of damage. So that's an interesting thing you could do. There's actually a lot of crazy options for that. I don't think I think it's pretty casual friendly, but you can die also pretty easily on it, so maybe not. I don't know. I guess I'll say not. I guess I'll say it's not that casual friendly. Physical charge though is pretty casual friendly. I think on physical charge, I think going Templars on Reaper's Toll Reaper's Toll on an Innocence Merc is really good when you joust in and charge and then get that amp proc on him instantly. But also the Innocence amp weapon, Cyclopean Roar, Whirlwind Mercenary is going to work really, really well here. The benefit, I guess, of the Act 2 Mercenary is you get Defiance. And sometimes, that Defiance aura is often a lot more alluring than the addition of Battlecry on top of amp on hardcore, so that's always something to consider on all those hardcore builds, or on any build where I mention the Act 5 Mercenary, so keep that in mind. Vengeance. Vengeance is interesting. Depends on your approach, but I think for the most part, you're just going to go Infinity, Blessed Aim, or Infinity, Defiance, depending on your actually not Blessed Aim, sorry, you got Conviction. You go Infinity, Defiance, for the most. Oh, sorry, no, you don't go Infinity on this. That's right, it's Vengeance. My bad. You would go like probably Rapture Act 5 Mercenary, and then you get lower resist. But you can also go a lot of other things as well, just more defensive mercenaries. So it kind of just depends on the situation, because you have Conviction on yourself. Because you need attack speed though, you can also go Fanaticism. So this might be a situation where you throw on the Beast on an Act 5 Mercenary as well. So yeah, it kind of just depends on the weapon and everything and how you're doing it. But you don't usually need Fanaticism, because you usually use a Phase Blade. But that is how you do like Zenith and a 2H, for instance. So kind of depends. But you don't need Infinity because you have max convictions. Don't worry about that. Smite. I actually think for Smite, you probably want to run, for the most part, I think it's just the Act 5 Innocence, Battlecry, and Amp one again. You just want to lower monsters' physical res. And then on yourself, you use a damage aura, and you crush face. It's usually going to work very well. And then sacrifice 1H and sacrifice 2H. Also can run that situation. What's interesting though on sacrifice though, while you can run the amp Battlecry Act 5 Mercenary, you oftentimes might have to justify, because you have like Fanaticism on yourself, you might have to justify some other approaches as well. Also, Heavenly Garb is a nice armor, because that negative magic res does help out the sacrifice damage quite a bit, so that's kind of neat. And then the rest being defensive gear on the Mercenary. I do think Smite is not a noob approach, at least not for mapping. Vengeance is a little more easy to execute, but it's a little tough as well. Anything where you have to kind of press Joust and Charge and Vengeance and go on to the next pack might be a little more intensive. It's kind of medium, I would say, though. Physical Charge is also kind of medium, but it's a bit more simple, though. Because Charge is the actual attack. So I'd actually say that is casual friendly. Smite is not. Sacrifice is kinda, but also kinda not. I don't know. It has like a damage component. It's kind of hard to say. All right, all the charges down here, I would say are pretty casual friendly, because you just charge into the monsters and kill them. So they're pretty one-button builds in general. And depending on whether you're using native aura or using the item equipment, depends on whether or not you want to use what kind of mercenary you want to use. If you're using the native aura, it's almost always going to be Blessed Aim or Defiance Act 2 Mercenary, depending on if you want more attack rating for like bosses or something. And of course, on the fire versions, you're going to want Flickering Flame. Otherwise, it'd probably be Ferocity and Innocence every time. And then otherwise, it's Flickering Flame and DR, or Ferocity, Innocence for a more defensive approach. Of course, if you are using the item version, Oftentimes, you're going to want to make use of the attack speed potential in the Mercenary, and in that case, you're going to run like Beast on an Act 5 Mercenary for that fanaticism. And that is kind of how you do that. On Sanctuary Charge, it's a bit decent. It's a little different though, but you're going to want, once again, Beast again for the attack speed. Almost certainly, particularly on these slower weapons that you use for that high level Sanctuary Aura level, the level on the actual Aura itself. And then Thorn's Sacrifice is... I actually think it's best without a Mercenary, so that the monsters just hit you and die. But you could also have your Mercenary also running really high level Thorns as well, so that's a thing. But the thing is if you're going to run Thorns, you have Synergized Thorns because you're a Paladin. So I'd actually run no Mercenary on that. And it is casual friendly, but it's kind of dumb. Just jump into the monsters and kill them. Make sure to proc amp. That's the other thing, is like amp proc is pretty important, so you're gonna have to do it yourself using Atmoscarab. Or I guess if you did want to go a Mercenary and don't mind the Mercenary taking hits, you could also do the Act 5 Mercenary thing. And Whirlwind, I guess, does jump far enough ahead of you sometimes to where you don't have to worry about it taking all of the hits from you. So Act 5 Cyclopean Roar, amp weapon, Innocence Mercenary is really good. Principal Strafe. This one you got to get all the Holy Bolt synergies. So it kind of depends. I think on yourself having Fanaticism is good for the attack speed, and then on the Mercenary you could go Asylum. You definitely want the aura to be out in front so that it's hitting the monsters. So the Mercenary you go Asylum, so Act 2 or Act 5 on that one. And that one is kind of casual friendly because you just kind of sit back and fire your shots, but you die easily. So make sure to never go up in front. Don't joust with a bow paladin. Bad idea. All right, whoa. Woo! You know, honestly, 115 builds, under an hour, casual or not, you know, all the different strong late game mercenary approaches. Damn, we did a pretty good job. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow in season 11 Prosperity, 10 a.m. PT. Hopefully you guys learned some awesome things that might inspire you or build confidence that you actually can build the build one and play the build in an effective manner that's going to make it OP. Anyway, good stuff. See you guys in the next one. Dark Humility, over and out. Let's get it.